G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with the dag end of the Outsiders and the first Moondog. It's, what are we looking at? 19th of April?
He's a fighter, and he just, I see that it's very, very difficult for him to actually make that transition into governing and capitalising on what's happening within
the switch into the serious
discussion.
Reform agenda.
Exactly. So I'm very sceptical.
I'm not as sceptical as you. I think it can be done, and I believe what part of the public debate with all of this does is that it also encourages some of the crossbenchers in the Senate to be a bit more...
If they're reflecting
they're reflecting what's going on in the public a little bit, as they all claim that they are. It allows you to actually, if you start shaping the debate and you can show a little bit of leadership with it, it does help you manipulate things and negotiate things through the Senate.
And
you never get all of what you want.
I'm with Sabine on this. They've demonstrated no ability to manage those negotiations so far.
Well,
on national security, no, that's right. On national security, I think that's a comfortable kind of zone. I don't think either Hockey or the Prime Minister, unfortunately, have that kind of capital or capacity to manage a process. And so, where's the process management in it? Is I think that's still the government's weakness, and it goes to campaigning, not governing.
How much capital do they get? And we're running out of time a little here. How much capital do they get from the fact of that public conversation? Does that allow them more wriggle room than if they had to create that sense themselves?
I think it's putting a deposit back in the bank. How much that deposit is, I don't quite know. Only time will tell us that. I mean, I think there is a bit more capital going back into the bank if you can use the opinion polls as perhaps saying what the level of deficit is, sort of thing in your bank account.
I guess we'll all see come the end of next month. But as you point out, Ian, that the process continues into the various white papers, which are looking increasingly significant.
I think it's going to be a fascinating sort of discussion with what comes out of those papers. I mean, there's a huge reform task ahead for any government of any ilk, and I think it's essential that we actually get on with it because the nation can't afford not to.
Well, and do some of the stuff that lies therein. Thanks to you all this morning, to Anne Tiernan from Griffith University School of Government and International Relations, to Ian Hankey, political consultant, and Sabine Wolfe from JWS Research.
Correct.
It's 5 minutes to 10.
Patriots. Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. This week, Anzac Day. Here at the First Dog on the Moon Institute, we've been troubled to see the apparent ease with which this National Day of commemoration has been co-opted by people wanting to make a quick buck. There are, of course, many businesses who, with the support of the RSL, are raising money for worthwhile organisations. However, there's a veritable army of Aussie companies happy to plant the flag of opportunistic commerce right on the beach of our National Day of mourning. And that's why we won't be having our usual guide to modern living this week. Instead, we'll be having a minute silence to commemorate Anzac Day. So let us now take a moment, Australia, to remember the fallen. The first 20 seconds of this minute's silence are brought to you by Crazy Barry's Rug Barn. More Kalims and Persians than you can poke a bayonet at. Find us at 112 Gallipoli Road, Mooroolbark. This 20 seconds of our national moment of quiet contemplation is proudly sponsored by the Simpsons Donkey Drive-Through Bottle Mart. Prices so low you'll wish you were only 19. And in the last moments of this solemn and respectful commemoration of the fallen, we'd like to thank our platinum corporate partners at the Anzac Day Monster Truck Demolition Derby. And while you're at it, don't get dysentery and die rotting in a trench. Come on down to Digger's Donuts and try our mateship churros with authentic Spanish Anzac chocolate dipping sauce. You'll find them at the Ataturk Valley Mall. So thanks for listening, Patriots. We'll leave you with the Ode of Remembrance. At the going down of the Sun Herald, don't forget your commemorative coin, which is worth double when you use it to buy fresh at Woolworths in memory of the men and women who gave the ultimate sacrifice. We will remember them. And also our Gallipoli shopper docket so we can get 4 cents off a litre of petrol. This has been the First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living from the First Dog on the Moon Institute. You're welcome.
Thanks, dog. And that's it for RN Sunday Extra today. Don't forget, if you've missed anything we've done.
Well. 3 holes in the ground. I remarked earlier this morning on a comment thread to VB Ed under his movie, asking these same questions. Are the Australians who are journeying to the Muddled East to fight in the conflict either for the ISIL self-styled caliphate or against the ISIL self-styled caliphate? Because Australia's actually got citizen Bojest wannabes who've gone over there on both sides. There was a Northern Territory ex-Labor Party president, ex-army trained medic who just came back to Australia after having gone over to Syria and apparently become involved with a Syrian rebel group fighting against ISIL. The group is being armed by the Americans and the Yankees are flying airstrikes for them. But because this particular individual was not part of the Australian Defence Forces who are allied to the group that he was fighting for, he's liable to 20 or 25 years in jail for illegally taking part in a foreign war. And as VB Ed said, there are Australians who have dual citizenship and they grow up in Melbourne knowing that they're loyal little Israelis and that they're going to have to go back to Israel and serve 18 months or 2 years in the Israeli Defence Forces because all Israelis are conscripted. And if you're an Australian Israeli, then you have to go over and help commit genocide in Gaza and, you know, punish the Palestinians for having ancestors who lived there for thousands of years while the Jews were somewhere else entirely doing some other bloody thing before they suddenly decided they wanted to go and live in the British mandated territory of Palestine. And anyway, it's okay for some Australians to go and take part in foreign wars because they're fighting on the side of a recognised government. I actually knew one bloke who claimed to have been called up for both sides to fight in the Falklands War. His father was an Argentine and therefore he was an Argentine no matter where he was born anywhere in the world. Argentines were subject to conscription. He'd grown up in England with his English mother and he'd done some sort of military training, therefore he was subject to national service. So the English called him up and wanted him to go to the Falkland Islands, and the Argentines called him up and wanted him to go to the Islas Malvinas. So he was supposed to go there and fight himself. And that would have been perfectly okay with the Australian government because he would have been taking part under the auspices of a recognised government. The people who decide that their Bojest fantasy means they've got to go and join a rebel force anywhere in the world, they're in the shit with the Australian government ever since we had some Yugoslavs training in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney getting ready to go over and make the Balkans into a bloody mess, and they were doing that in Australia in the 1970s. The bit that really confuses me is that we have our Prime Minister and our politicians saying loudly and longly and strongly that anybody who wants to leave Australia and go over to the Muddled East and get involved in fighting over there is a lunatic with a death wish and it's un-Australian and they're wicked and evil and horrible. But as his Anzac Day gesture to the 100 years since Australia tried and spent 9 months failing to invade the Islamic Caliphate of Turkey on the 25th of April 1915, Tony Abbott has just sent another 350 Australians to go and join a whole, I think it's the same number of Kiwis, and they're going to be made to camp halfway between Baghdad and the ISIL front line. And whereas everybody in NATO plus the wannabe coalition of the killing, including Australians, have spent 12 or 13 years trying to teach the Iraqi citizenry how to use NATO weaponry and how NATO forces operate in the field and what their order of battle is and what their tactics and strategies are likely to be. And every time NATO and the Yanks and the Australians have trained the Iraqis how to do all this stuff, they've promptly deserted anytime they get attacked, or they run away and they join the opposition and they take all that knowledge and weaponry and stuff to join the opposition. So it's staked out like bloody goats waiting for a lion to pounce on them, halfway between ISIL's front line and Baghdad. There's now 350 Australians and a couple of 100 or 300 Kiwis, and their job, according to Tony Abbott, is to teach the Iraqis how to fight to defend themselves against ISIL. It's like the guy's got absolutely no sense of history or military history or the inevitability of trying to do the same thing over and over and over again and get a different result. The idea that he's managed to polarise Australian society into Muslims and non-Muslims, and all the non-Muslims are vaguely terrified of all the Muslims, and all the Muslims are totally bloody terrified of the non-Muslims because they know that they're in the graticule of suspicion for anything that has happened or might happen or is possible to be likely to happen. So congratulations, Tony Abbott. You know, like by getting Australia involved in this shit fight, you've sort of gone a long way to destroy the fabric of Australian egalitarian democratic freedom. You know, back in 1915, when the Broken Hill picnic train was shot up by a couple of Islamic Caliphate fanatics, that didn't cause persecution of Muslims all around Australia, as far as I know. Some Germans got locked up because they were part of the German Empire. I know things got pretty rough for the Afghans out around Broken Hill because the people out there were pretty peeved at the idea that someone who'd been living in Australia for years could suddenly decide to make war against the British Empire. But feelings of nationalism and patriotism were so ingrained back then that everybody pretty much viewed the enemy soldiers as being brave, honourable, noble people who were just doing their duty because that's what you do, is you fight for your country. The problem is you can't have 150 or 200 countries where everybody in the country thinks it's perfectly okay to kill in defence of that country and expect none of them are going to go fighting. The problem is belief in war, or faith in war, having faith that becoming violent, getting organised violence is going to secure anything other than a friggin' mess. That's what the problem is. In the long baseline view, warriors are patriotic compost on the hoof. You know, they will eventually all kill each other and there won't be any warriors left. And as long as there are some pacifists and vegetarians sitting on a hill somewhere else, life will be fine, you know. The meek will inherit the earth. When the last two violently doubtful warrior atheists fighting for the last can of dog food in the final supermarket pop up from behind the rotting freezer bins and head shoot each other. Pop bang, they'll both drop down dead. And then the pacifists and the vegetarians can come out and grow our food in the rotting remains. Eventually the meek will inherit the earth, because warriorism, it's the sort of thing where if that's the answer, gee, it must have been a stupid question. I'm just sad that we're led by an idiot who wants Australia to get involved in the crap that's going on in the Muddled East. It's none of our business. We shouldn't be there, you know. There you go. Happy Australian New Zealand Army Corps Day to you. If you want a better version, go and have a look in Warbles in the Wilderness series and check my poetry. Ciao.